Hey guys, it's Cece, and today I'm here to do some monthly recommendations. Monthly Recommendations is a Goodreads group that was originally created by Kayla Rain of the channel Kayla Rain and Trina of the channel Between Chapters. I will leave the link to the Goodreads page as well as links to Kayla and Trina's channels down in the description below. Go check them out and be sure to go and join in on monthly recommendations. We get a new prompt every month for a video or a blog post or whatever you're interested in, and we just get to recommend books based on that prompt. It's a really fun thing to be involved in, so check it all out. The theme for this month's recommendations, since we are rounding out the end of 2017, is just to talk about new to you authors. So this video is going to be authors that I discovered in 2017 that I either read multiple books by them or that their first book was so impressive I cannot wait to see what they've done next, and I definitely want to read more books by them. I have 6 authors to talk about, and let's just jump in and get started. The very first author I want to talk about is Shaun David Hutchinson, and the book I read by him this year was We Are the Ants. Now, I only read one book by Shaun David Hutchinson this year, but it became instantly one of my new favorite books of all time, and so I feel like he deserves a place on this list. Plus, since I read We Are the Ants, I have accumulated a bunch of other Shaun David Hutchinson to read. Like, for real, Simon & Schuster hooked me up when it comes to 2018 Shaun David Hutchinson reading. We Are the Ants, as I'm sure you all know by this point, I talk about this book constantly, but it's about a boy named Henry who's been going through an incredibly difficult time in his life. A few months before the book begins, Henry's boyfriend killed himself, and as he's still recovering from that, there's other stuff going on in his life, such as the fact that his grandmother is rapidly losing her memory. He's also occasionally being abducted by aliens who have informed him that they know exactly when the world's going to end and that he has the power to stop it. It's just that right now where Henry is in life, he doesn't see a point to keeping the world turning. This book is one of the most gorgeously written books I have ever read. I'm sad I don't have this book here to show you because it is absolutely covered in post-it notes. I just felt like there was something new on every single page for me to go, ah! It's beautiful. Ah! It's one of those books that was just so drenched in quotes that I wanted to remember forever that I can't imagine myself not loving so many of Shaun David Hutchinson's other books. So I have to recommend him. I love this book, and I can't wait to read the 2 I have. I can't wait to read The 5 Stages of Andrew Brawley. I just feel like he's going to be a new favorite author of mine for much longer than just 2017. The next author I want to talk about is Moira Fowley-Doyle, and the book of hers that I read this year was Spellbook of the Lost and Found. Spellbook of the Lost and Found takes place in a small town in Ireland, and it is about 6 different teenagers. One night in this town, after a party, things start to disappear. At first it's innocuous, it's hair bows and purses, but slowly more and more starts to vanish, like people. The mantra going around in town is everybody lost something. And then one of these 6 teenagers comes across a book with a spell in it that seems to have a part for each of them to play that might help everybody get back something that they lost. There are 3 point of view characters, all girls. 2 of those point of view characters are queer. There's a female-female romance. 2 of the queer girls are bisexual. It says that on the page. One of the bisexual girls is deaf in one ear. One of them is half Indian. There's so much other diversity in this book, but honestly, the thing that drew me to it was also how magically written it was. It has this easy magic that seeps into every part of this small Irish town that makes it feel like everyone has a little something lurking below the surface. It's intricate, it's magical, and I really, really liked it, and it really made me want to read Moira Fowley-Doyle's first book, The Accident Season, which is also magical and bisexual. I just definitely was interested in reading more of her books after I read this first one, and I really, really recommend Spellbook of the Lost and Found. The next author I want to talk about is Mackenzi Lee, author of The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. This book is on this list because obviously I really enjoyed Gentleman's Guide, but also because I got to meet Mackenzi Lee this year, and I think that that just makes it even more of a authors you discovered this year kind of perfect book. There you go. That's from when I met her and she signed my book. It was very cool. The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue is a romantic historical fiction, teeny tiny bit magical road trip romp. It's set in the 1700s and it's about a boy named Monty who has been born and bred to be a gentleman, and he is going to go on his grand tour of Europe before he comes of age and kind of takes over his family's estate. He's also harboring a very deep and he feels unrequited crush on his best friend Percy. So Monty, Percy, and Monty's sister Felicity all end up going on this road trip together until Monty does something ridiculous and gets them all thrown into a ridiculous adventurous journey together. This book was a ridiculously fun time. I laughed constantly throughout it. It was also full of great characters. I loved Monty and him kind of trying to unlearn a lot of stuff about himself. I loved Percy, and I loved the chance that this book gave to explore Percy's identity as a person of color in 1700s Europe. Well, it's a super fun time. It also deals with intense subjects that I think it handles really well, and because of all of that, I know I'm going to be reading so many more of Mackenzi Lee's books, and there are so many that are coming out in the next couple of years I can be excited for. She has Semper Augustus, which I think is a historical fiction book about ladies falling in love. Yes. She's releasing a nonfiction book called Bygone, Badass Broads that I'm really looking forward to, as well as the fact that she just announced she's writing a YA book about Loki, who she has said on Twitter is canonically pansexual and genderqueer, so I can only assume great things will come from that book. And reading Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue was more than enough to convince me I'm definitely going to have to check out more of her books in the future, so I think you should read this one too. Moving on, I want to talk about April Daniels, who wrote the Nemesis duology, I think, and that series includes Dreadnought and Sovereign, both of which I read in 2017. This book is about a trans girl named Dani who has been very deeply in the closet, and then the superhero Dreadnought dies at her feet, and Dani inherits his powers along with the body she has always wanted. Unfortunately, the reason she's been in the closet is that she has been in an incredibly abusive home that never would have supported her transition, so she's forced out of the closet and forced to deal with a lot of those things, while also dealing with the fact that she's now a superhero and has to fight supervillains. This book's trans rep is Own Voices, and it is just an incredibly good duology. This series does such a great job of exploring the fun and funnier aspects of being a superhero, the tech, the costumes, all that kind of thing, while also getting really into the trauma of being a superhero, which is a thing I think goes explored less in superhero stories. Dani was a normal person, and now she has to kill people, and that is a huge thing to contend with, especially considering that Dani's only 15. The series also has a female-female romance in the second book that I think is fantastic, because Dani's a lesbian and is very open about that as well. It's just really great, and it makes me so excited to read more of April Daniels' books as they come out, but like, this series was fantastic. The second to last author I want to talk about is Jacqueline Woodson, and I read 2 books by her this year, Brown Girl Dreaming as well as The House at the End of the Street. But this is another author I want to talk about because I actually met Jacqueline Woodson this year. She came to my school and she signed my copy of Brown Girl Dreaming, which I don't have with me, but I promise she did, and it was really exciting. Jacqueline Woodson has written tons of books, a lot of which I would really like to read, but especially Another Brooklyn. I've heard incredible things, mostly from my girlfriend Janelle, who read it and really, really wants me to read it. Another Brooklyn is actually the book that she signed for Janelle, so that's also pretty cool. Well, I didn't really love The House at the End of the Street. I adored Brown Girl Dreaming. It was sort of a memoir in verse form. It just talks about Jacqueline's early years growing up as a black girl in Brooklyn in the 1960s and 70s. It deals with where you feel most at home and the meanings behind a name, and it's just so incredible. Also, hearing Jacqueline Woodson speak was really remarkable because she's such an impressive person who just has this way with words that constantly blows me away. So yeah, I will definitely be reading more Jacqueline Woodson in the future, and I highly encourage you to check out Brown Girl Dreaming. I think it was really great, and yeah, I just have to talk about her because she was a really impressive person and it was so cool to meet her. And the last author I want to talk about is Austin Chant. I read 3 novellas by Austin Chant this year, all 3 of his novellas, starting with Peter Darling, then I read Coffee Boy, and most recently I read Caroline's Heart. They're all so good. All of Austen's novellas are own voices trans stories, like all 3 of the ones that I have read have been that, and he just has this ability to write characters I can be so invested in such a short period of time. I'm always interested in his romantic relationships. I think that he writes this tension that is just fantastic, and I'm always there for it. I think his books are funny and charming across genres because all 3 of these books are very different in terms of genre. As a quick rundown, Peter Darling is a retelling / sequel to Peter Pan, and it is a version of Peter Pan where he grew up as Wendy. Neverland was the only place where he got to be himself, but when he returns to London, he kind of goes through the next 10 years and realizes that it's never going to be a place where he's accepted or happy, so as a grown man, he returns to Neverland. Neverland is really, really dark and brutal, which is exactly the kind of Neverland I'm interested in. I live for it. I live for the fact that people, like, die in Neverland. Plus, it includes a male-male romance between Peter and Captain Hook. It's great. It's really great. Coffee Boy is really just a romance. It's about a trans guy who goes to work in a political office as an intern and starts to fall for his boss while he's there. It does a great job of exploring gender and sexuality, and it has this great male-male romance at the center that I got really invested in real fast. Yes. And finally, there's Caroline's Heart, which is a Western magical witch story with cowboys. Yeah, it takes place in the Wild West where witches exist, and there's this cowboy named Roy, and he's trans, and he's kind of staying under the radar, and then this witch shows up, and when Roy is mortally wounded, Caroline has to sacrifice the heart of her former lover to save Roy. This book is also great for the romance. It's great for the fact that both of the main characters are trans and their story goes, it's just so good and it's heartbreaking at times, and it does a great job of taking place in this very solid historical time period while also being very open about discussions of sexuality and gender. Yeah, I completely fell in love with Austen Chant this year. I can't wait to see what else he does. When I found out arcs of Caroline's Heart were going out, I emailed him so intensely, like, please send me an arc of Caroline's Heart, which I then read immediately and adored. So clearly I can't wait to see what he'll do next, and if you haven't read any of his novellas, I so recommend that you do. I think that they're all really impressive. Yeah, check them out. Okay guys, that's it! Those are the new to me authors that I wanted to talk about that I discovered in 2017. Are there any authors that you discovered this year that you've just like fallen in love with in 2017? Please let me know down in the comments below, and let me know if you've read any books by any of the authors I talked about. Thank you so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!